Mr. Ristuccia, thank you for having us here at the KFOR's press office.
Thank you for your invitation.
How do you assess the current situation in Kosovo from security point of view?
The situation actually is apparently calm, but at the same time fragile and volatile. It is a result of a series of incidents and crises which occurred starting in June 2022, but if we go back from October 2021, a serious crisis which erupted one after the other, and at the end of which the balance that was reached became more precarious than the previous one. Each crisis required much more energies from the international community, from KFOR, to create the conditions, both parties to come back to the table negotiations and to find solutions. So nowadays we can say that, of course, the situation is much more better than it was in December. But anyway, there are a lot of issues which concern us, such as, for instance, the dangerous vacuum that was created in the north after the resignation of the Kosovo Serbs from the institutions in Kosovo. This vacuum is very dangerous, especially from the security point of view, and we need to come back as soon as possible through the dialogue and through the effective political process. There is too much tension still among the population. The population feel anxious. They have a sense of insecurity, and that's the reason why we rebalanced our efforts in order to be more present in the north, to reassure them that anyway we are there.
When you say, what does it mean to increase your presence?
I mean, you see that the number of KFOR activities significantly increased since let me say, July last year.
Speaking of tensions, could there be any instability on the ground yet in the upcoming period? For example, violent protests by the majority community, you mentioned dialogue, or again barricades in the north, or any other violent incident?
I'm exchanging points of view with journalists or with those who ask me the same question. I'm saying that I see, let me call in a technical way, the operational environment at this time saturated. What I mean saturated? There is an enormous pressure which comes from a kind of approach used by both parties who are involved in this, Serbia and Kosovo, based on a principle of action, reaction, counter-reaction, which is very dangerous. Both parties showed not to see a win-win solution, but a zero-sum game solution. And when such a kind of dynamics are in place, the risks increase, especially the risk of miscalculation or the risk of misunderstanding. So that is the major point of concern I have. The risk of miscalculation comes when you are on the corner and the worst choice is done.
This is what President of Serbia very often says when you are pushed to the corner. Is there any indication, like concrete indication of any instability in a future period, speaking of Kosovo?
The only indication of instability is due to the fact that the peace process up to a certain point was at a stalemate, and the dialogue is the only means to solve outstanding issues. Now we have, let me say, some positive indicators. I mean, both parties approach the situation in a more constructive way. You know better than me that in the coming days there will be a very important meeting in Brussels. So this is a good indicator. But anyway, tension, as I told you, the feeling of insecurity that the population still perceive are indicators that do not are in favor of peace and stability, especially in such a time.
I've just mentioned Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić. So speaking of Serbia, is Serbia or the Serbian government a threat to security in Kosovo, as for months we've been hearing from Kosovo's leadership as such?
First, let me give you an example to clarify my answer after. So, first of all, when we talk about security, perceptions make the difference. And perceptions are affected by our background, perceptions are affected by personal experience, perceptions are affected by mistrust sometimes, perceptions are affected by cultural barriers. So, when we refer to this region, the past is something very sensitive. A tragedy occurred in the past, and sometimes, let me say also very often, people, because of this tragedy, read the event filtering their perception through this lens. So I try to understand what there is behind the rhetoric and the narrative from both parties. But coming back to your question, I would like to make it very clear that we have good relations with Serbia. Anytime I interact with my first interlocutor, who is General Mojsilovic, there is nothing to complain about that. And NATO has a partnership for peace with Serbia. We have good relations in terms of the what is the implementation of the technical agreement, which is integral part of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1244. Our joint implementation commission works very well with our counterpart. And we did not experience any incident along the administrative boundary line. And I can say I have never perceived Serbia in such a way. And of course, because there is such a kind of, let me say, sense of trust between interlocutors. When, just to give you an example, a couple of days ago there was fake news. I immediately called General Mojsilovic, and he told me, "Oh,
which one?"
Well, no, I don't mention about what we are talking about, but he told me immediately, "Oh yes, I understood since the beginning that it was a fake news." So I mean, but also I try to read through the words, and words matter in this area, you know better than me, what there is behind. I think that a big step forward needs to be done in terms of building up mutual trust among parties to avoid such a kind of perceptions.
But you don't see now this mutual trust?
I don't see. Of course, I told you, I think it is based more on what was the past, the mistrust, which is the worst ingredient in this kind of dynamics, which affects the way how relations are perceived. I
wanted to ask you later about the cooperation.
Sorry to interrupt you. And that's the reason why the effort made by the international community is so strong. Because as much as this sense of mistrust increases, the efforts that everybody has done in order to improve the situation is enormous.
But when you mention the matter of trust and cooperation, you already answered my question. But I wanted also to refer to a very concrete event, speaking of the cooperation with the Serbian army. You recently received a request from Belgrade on the request for return of a certain personnel in Kosovo following 1244 resolution. I must ask you, you choose if you answer that question or not. Was that a hot potato in your hands because you were like a newcomer as a KFOR, or was a piece of joke as also, or was really a threat One public in Serbia, part of that took it as a joke, the other part took it as a security need. Kosovo saw as a security threat.
I want to be very clear in this, and thank you for these questions. Of course I answer. I was deployed here neither to manage hot potatoes nor to joke. I take everything serious in this area. That's the reason why it took time for me to prepare to come here. This is the first thing. Second, it was a letter which was sent to me by a prime minister of a government who expressed the concern of his nation and sent a request. So, my staff, we analyzed it, and I replied simply reassuring that KFOR is fully committed to implement our mandate and is fully committed to work for peace and stability in the area in the interest of all people in Kosovo. Therefore, the request was declined because of this reassurance. Very simple. There is no perception which filtered the way how we dealt with this very important issue. We took it very seriously as it deserved.
We saw the content of your response published by Belgrade, so that is pretty much the content you sent to Belgrade, right?
This is what was said by the open sources. This is my answer.
Speaking of perceptions or real threats, another very important issue is constant complaints and accusations from Kosovo officials against, I'm quoting now, Malayan Russian influence in Kosovo via Serbia, also mentioning different groups. Is Wagner a real political threat, or just a real security threat, or just a political story? And is the threat of Russia in Kosovo real, or this is just also a political story? And today, as we speak, it's anniversary of Ukraine war and Russia invasion.
Going to the first question, but it is cross-cutting, my answer. First, it is our job, but also our moral duty, to have a clear understanding of what happens here in the area. Because security, stability is our responsibility, our first responsibility. We are one of the main pillars of the security system in the area. Therefore, let me reassure all the citizens here in Kosovo, that we have a clear idea of what is going on. We work based on the NATO intelligence, but we count also on the intelligence of 20 NATO allies and on the intelligence of 7 partners.
And they
NATO.
say what?
So we do not have any evidence of the presence of these groups you mentioned, before Wagner. We do not have any clear evidence. But anyway, we clearly and very thoroughly follow any development of the situation. We try to follow any kind of weak signal that could give us indications of presence of this kind of groups. But up to now, we do not have any evidence of it. To be also more precise, all the events that happened in the area in the past months, weeks, are more related to an internal dynamics than to the external influence. Of course, in this world which is characterized by a volatile, uncertain, contested, hyper-connected, hyper-congested, hyper-complex relations, every kind of event affects the life of people who live elsewhere. So, and the war in Ukraine, of course, has been affecting all over Europe, especially from the economical point of view, from the energetic point of view, and also you also know that it affected of also food security. So even in this area, energy prices, the costs increased dramatically. So of course this is such a kind of influence which affected the area. And as far as Russia is concerned, let me refer what was our Secretary General statement in the past, who invited Russia to assume a more constructive role, especially in the Balkans. We do not need in Europe another crisis. But unfortunately, in the last times, we are experiencing a different kind of approach. I mean, we see an increase in the cyber attack towards critical infrastructures, or malicious actors trying to affect or destabilize the services of government.
So, connected to Russia.
Maybe connected to Russia, but it is not part of a constructive approach our Secretary General expected, and everybody expected, in order to stabilize the area and to avoid another crisis to affect also.
To stick just to some very concrete accusation, for instance, when Kosovo Prime Minister says, or I'm almost quoting, that once Russia finishes its job in Ukraine, via its proxy Serbia, he says, will attack Kosovo. Is that realistic?
Everybody is accountable for his own point of view. As far as I am concerned, we do not have any evidence of this.
Okay, speaking of another threat, let's concentrate a bit with Kosovo Serbian people. Are you familiar? There is something that Kosovo Serbs are extremely concerned of. These are the activities of Kosovo security forces. I'm not saying whether that's true or not. I'm just passing the perception of Kosovo Serbian people. So, are you familiar with the most recent activities in Crnuša? This is once, I would say, strategic point in south of Mitrovica. Last week, there was officially confirmed as a military drill with live ammunition, which is in South Mitrovica municipality. Is that allowed in the NATO-controlled territory?
This area is a training area. Nothing more, nothing less. Even we as KFOR, we use this training area. Also for environmental issues, we try to limit the areas where to train in order not to affect the environment, because these are areas where we are allowed and everybody trains. So this is very simple. I have notice of these training activities, as everybody trained, also them trained. As you know, Kosovo security forces are not allowed to go to the north without the concurrence of KFOR commander. And up to now, I never received such a kind of request. We fully appreciate their role within search and rescue activities, disaster relief, explosive ordnance disposal. And they are very professional in this. When they were deployed in Turkey to help the population for the tremendous tragedy which occurred there, I mean, they acted very professionally, and they have to be appreciated for this.
So what would be your answer? Kosovo officials and Kosovo public sees them as army, as Kosovo's army. Yet, as per the Monday, they are still officially Kosovo security forces. Are they army or are they not? Are Kosovo officials also, if they are not, are Kosovo officials right when they refer to KBS as army?
So, first of all, I will not venture in commenting on what politicians say at any given time, but it is very clear to me what is the ambition of the Kosovo security forces to become the armed forces of Kosovo. And they train, operate, and are transforming with that intention. We know this. So, but for KFOR, the Kosovo security forces is undergoing a transformation process following what our Secretary General defined the ill-timed adoption of law in 2018, which changed the mandate of KSF. So NATO is still reviewing its engagement towards KSF as a result of this law. So we have very good cooperations in the fields I mentioned to you before that are related to the previous mandate. I mean, we have very good cooperation in the field of search and rescue, of explosive ordnance disposal, on disaster relief. And then there is NALT, who is also supporting them in the fields related to the original mandate.
You mentioned very clear procedure about potential arrival of KBS, that they cannot come to the north without your prior consent. But what about Kosovo Special Police Forces? This issue has arisen that wider, especially in Serbian political arena, very much and very often referred by the top Serbian officials, Srpska Lista officials. Is that a different case? No, I'm not asking about the regular police units. I'm asking a very simple question. Are Kosovo Special Police units allowed to come to the north freely and operate?
Yes. I mean, thank you for this question, because it helps me to clarify a couple of things. First, if I'm not wrong, point 7 of the Brussels Agreement, which was signed also by Serbia, clearly identified as Kosovo Police the only authority to deal with law enforcement and policing tasks. So, regardless the branches in which Kosovo Police is organized, whatever it is, ordinary police of ROSU, Special Forces of Kosovo Police, they have to deal with crime and with organized crime groups. So there is no constraint, no limitation for Kosovo Police to exercise and to do this kind of tasks all over Kosovo.
Mr. Ristuccia, I have to ask you a follow-up about these special police units. Could it happen, just hypothetically, that while the Brussels Agreement has been envisaged, there was lack of planning, let's say, this particular sensitive issue, that back in 2013 decides at least one of them would not be aware of potential risk, what we've been seeing for the past 1 or 2 years, this very, very strong presence of Kosovo and deployment of special Kosovo police units coming from all over the region, even before Serbs left Kosovo police, and installment of these special police bases in the north, in Zubin Potok area and in Leposavić. The question is whether that could be a bit of lack of security planning, or do you think it's very regular situation? The question is it, are you okay with the installment of, KFOR or NATO, with the installment of Kosovo Special Police bases in the north?
So, to be clear also in this field, let me first refer to the current situation, because it is the most important issue. As I mentioned before, the major concern in terms of security is the vacuum that was caused by the resignation of the Kosovo Serbs from the institutions in Kosovo. And this vacuum is very dangerous. And I understand the concern of the institutions in Kosovo, authorities, to deal with especially the organized crime groups in this situation. Someone has to take care of criminality in the interest of the citizens. So what is the real problem is the acceptance by the citizens of Kosovo Police, especially in this situation. And it is again, and we come back again to what I said answering to one of your questions, I mean, it is also a matter of mistrust. When you were asking me this question, I was thinking the only example I can provide you with, the reality I know, which is the Italian reality. When you refer to police, I refer to, for instance, Italian police of Italian Carabinieri. I'm more familiar with Carabinieri because we work every day with them.
Carabinieri are widely accepted by both communities here.
In Italy, Carabinieri, police, are also, even criminals are, believe Carabinieri, trust in Carabinieri.
Here as well.
And to our police. Because they, through their commitment, their empathy, their sensitiveness, they are able to understand. They make huge efforts to understand the needs of the population and how to deal with the population. If you go to a district in Italy, what we say quartiere in Italian, the chief of the police knows every family. He knows even the history of every family, generations of the family. He is able to understand what there is behind a behavior. So it is a matter of trust. And trust affects perception, and trust plays a paramount role here. So mistrust, on the contrary, affects negatively what's going on. We need to build up mutual trust, and the only way to build up mutual trust is to go to the table negotiation, to avoid any useless rhetoric, to avoid any narrative which ignites tension, which affects people, which, let me say, in a toxic way, affect the behavior of the population. We do not need this. The only way to solve the problem is to come back to the table of the negotiation and to empower the dialogue, the force of the dialogue.
Speaking of perception, that is that's wider perception of Kosovo Serbs. They would, for instance, have, I would say, quite significant trust in Carabinieri, even since 1999 up until 2024, but they wouldn't exercise any kind of trust now with Kosovo Special Police forces coming from outside the Mitrovica region. Well, they for more than 10 years were part of the same formation. But are you aware of these perceptions coming from the north that even before Kosovo Serbs left Kosovo Police for at least 1 year, with the installment of these bases of Special Kosovo Police, most people wouldn't see that as fight against crime, organized crime, corruption, secure the borderline, etc., but they would call it, I'm quoting now, occupation, militarization, nationalistic agenda. Are you aware of the collision between perception in Pristina and in the north?
I understand. And the only way to answer this question is what I said to you before. The words you used are the words that come from this filter, from mistrust. I mean, I understand really and honestly speaking the concern of the institutions in Kosovo Authority to fight against the organized crime groups. And it is not an easy battle to fight. But it requires also the cooperation of the citizens. This is not a virtual circle, this one. We need to trigger a virtuous circle.
To finish this issue about Kosovo Police, one of the hottest issues currently for the northern population is the expropriation of land. I don't know how much you follow. At first glance, it's not necessarily a security issue, but under the surface, at least on the ground, it comes as a pure security issue. So there are several Serbian legal experts, who are warning that with the latest decision in the past 6 months on the expropriation of land in the north, that includes also a privately owned land, under the excuse from Pristina that they are building up infrastructure, that they want to do economic development, that they want to increase security, but clearly without providing a clear answer why the land has been expropriated. We are talking about more than 138 hectares in 2 municipalities. There is a very strong perception within the community, seeing the changes on the ground, that at least on the part of the expropriated land, these special police bases have been already installed, or works are under structure. And some explanations came that this is only for the intensification of border police. Now, some Serbian experts are warning, saying that a border base is located at the crossings can be located only in the area of 500-meter zone, and you cannot build up a base for a border police that goes, let's say, 15 kilometers from the boundary line with Serbia. Is this true or not? Is the military procedure, or I don't know, the resolution or Kumanov agreement, are they clear about the presence of the border police?
So, first, we are very sensitive to the issue of the expropriation, which occurred not only in Leposavac but also in Zubin Potok and Zvekan. Of course, we are following this issue as far as we are concerned for the implementation of our mandate. I mean, with all the outcomes that could pertain to the security. That's the reason why we are in constant and closely contact and coordination with all the international organizations who are dealing with this problem. I'm referring to OSCE, ULEX, UMEC. They are following thoroughly this issue. And I'm in constant contact with the head of mission of these international organizations, as well as my staff is in close coordination with the staff of this.
Can border police be, must border police be within 15 meters area close to the boundary line, or it can go beyond?
There is a European agreement about the management of the border. So this is a political issue, okay? This is a political issue, and it is dealt within the political arena. That's the first point. Second, as far as Kosovo police, generally speaking, is concerned, Kosovo police can work all over Kosovo. They have no limitation. Regardless the branch Kosovo police is organized into. Okay.
You answered about the expropriation, about your concern. I'm finishing with this topic with just one follow-up. There has been also a very strong rumor, actually belief amongst the Northerners. They even don't believe these bases are built for Kosovo police, but they are going to be military barracks in future. And this is very publicly said, including their lawyers, people whose land has been expropriated. Just a few days ago, their lawyers publicly said that they are going to be military barracks. Of course, Kosovo side has never confirmed such a rumor. Do you think that these bases will remain, and will they? Do they look like military bases?
Which one?
Four bases, 2 in Zubin Potok area and 2 in Leposavic.
The one
Jasenovic primarily, and
what we know is that Kosovo police is there. This is not military bases. And we are clear evidence that there are only Kosovo police officers there. That is clear. These are not military bases, for sure.
Mr. Ristuccia, I have to ask you one personal question, because ever since the beginning of this interview...
You're asking me a lot of questions.
Yeah, but one personal question, because we've discussed a lot of issues that actually been quite on the hot spot as soon as you arrived in Kosovo. What was really the most difficult moment for you since you arrived here? And is there anything that is easy to you?
I think nothing is easy here in Kosovo, for sure, at least for me. I take anything serious because anything can have its effect on what matters. But the most difficult thing I have been experiencing is to be successful in helping all our partners in building up mutual trusts between the parties and to convince them to transform challenges into opportunities. That is the most difficult issue because they do not have the ability to capitalize the achievements, and there were very great achievements that were reached, that are achieved. This is the most difficult thing I have been experiencing here. So throughout these 4 months of my tenure, I had the opportunity to see that some achievements were reached, but no one of the parties explicitly declared his own appreciation for what was done in order to trigger what I said before, a virtuous circle. Instead, some unilateral actions were taken that put under discussion what was achieved. We need them to approach in a constructive way. And the last signals are positive in this sense.
Do you maybe want to tell me an example of an unilateral action as such? Do you remember or you want to share with public?
I don't want to speculate on this in order to avoid being exploited by whoever would like to do it.
The very last question. Through the entire interview, you talked about building up mutual trust. Personally, I agree that you can't do anything unless you at least try to understand and believe and trust the other side. What would be your concrete piece of advice to those who don't care about trust or they just are not aware how to build trust? What are the concrete steps?
So my advice is what is the KFOR 27 motto: shape the present for a better future. Both of them, everybody who is concerned within this, let me call it, peace process, they have to think to the future generations. Our children, because we say our children, because this area is so much important for Europe that I have to say our children need a better future. We have to shape the present to allow them to live in a better world. If we do not understand this, we cannot build trust.
But
children are children.
Yes, but on short term, like a quick fix suggestion or short term, what concretely that means?
Come back to the table negotiations, sit and then start working seriously to reach a peaceful agreement, a common solution, a win-win solution.
Mr. Ristuccia, thank you for talking to Kosovo.
Thank you.